Hey everybody, welcome back to our final episode on the Old Testament. Tomorrow we'll be getting into the New Testament, and so we have been on this journey for quite a while, and today it is ending in the book of Malachi. And for the 4 chapters that are here, there is a lot packed into this thing. We're going to talk about apostasy. We're going to talk about what offerings are acceptable to God and what offerings are offensive to God. We're going to be talking about marriage and divorce. We're going to be talking about filling up the storehouses and being rewarded for our giving. And then we're going to talk about this messenger and also this Elijah guy. And then God will be quiet for like 400 years. In the silent years. So this is no small task today.
So I really appreciate the book of Malachi because there is so much packed into these 4 chapters. It's like a short read, but you don't feel like you're walking away with like one tiny thing. There's like several nuggets of like, oh my goodness, that weighs heavy. But what's interesting about the book is the way that it is, the way that it's written is like this conversation between the people and God. And just these like they're considered disputes between God and the people, and it's really interesting how it gives us this like 2-sided conversation of how the Israelites feel like, well, God's turning his back on us, and then God reassures them like, hey, you guys are falling short. Yes, there's going to be judgment, but I'm never going to leave you. So it's like this weird conversation back and forth, and it does hit on several like crazy different things. So make sure you actually listen to the reading today, because I think it like we can talk all we want, but listening to the actual words is
God's words are always
powerful.
more important than our words.
Yes.
Always. So just so everybody understands where we're at, this is the last book of the Old Testament. We already said that, but chronologically it actually is. Like this is the last thing that's written. It is about these Jews that have returned from exile. They've returned from Babylon. They're in Jerusalem. It's evident that the reforms of Nehemiah are taking place. That's why they talk so much about marriage. But it's also obvious that they are not doing so hot. So last in Nehemiah, we talked about how they were starting to take their faith seriously. Now we're seeing that has not stuck very well. And so it's widely believed that Malachi was written sometime shortly after the Nehemiah Ezra narrative. And it could be as early as almost exactly the same time, because it's dealing with similar concepts. So Malachi chapter 1 is going to talk about how it's great that they're offering sacrifices, but they're bringing all these janky animals. So,
well, there's a callback too to Jacob and Esau.
Yeah.
And it talks a little bit about in that first paragraph before it even gets into their offerings. Like Israel's almost just like this sad little kid in the corner. Like, do you even love me anymore? Like, do you even care about me? And God's like, yo, I required certain things of you, and you brought these ridiculous offerings thinking that like I didn't see them. Would you offer these things to the governor? Would you give somebody who can see physically right in front of you these things? He's like, I see all of it. I see that you're bringing your sheep that don't have an eye. I see your sheep that are lame or whatever. And so God is very upfront about their silliness. Like, of course I still love you. You also need to bring me your best.
They are aware of this. And this is kind of like in the history, not necessarily in the text, but these people would have been under heavy Persian taxes. And so when he says, would you bring that goat to the governor? It's not a hypothetical situation.
Yeah.
It's a real situation. It's like, hey, you're taking everything you're supposed to the Persians, and yet you're cheating me because you're like giving me these janky animals. So when we offer things to God, we're supposed to bring our first and our best. And actually that guideline gets even stiffer in the New Testament, when it is like we are supposed to give to support whatever need exists. So in the Old Testament, it's like 1/10 starting with the first and the best. That's the tithe. In the New Testament, it's like just give and give and give to support whatever is needed and whatever is going on to build God's kingdom and support God's work. And so the first chapter is all about this nonsense that people are trying to bring to God. I just get this vision of this guy that's like trying to hide the fact that his like lamb can't even walk and has one eye. And it's like, here, I'm bringing my best to God.
If
but
you couldn't see me, I like definitely like made a huge eye roll. Like, oh, that's so annoying, but it makes sense because we do it too.
But don't we do the same thing
Yes,
where it's
yes.
like, I mean, we literally handle our faith that way. Like, well, I went to church. That's pretty cool. And God's like, what? What are you talking
What about
about?
that crazy crap you were doing last night or the other day or whatever? Yeah, that makes a
What about the
lot of
fact that
sense.
you just used the word crap? Oh, my word.
Oh my
Maybe you better
word.
confess that.
Anyway, so that's the first of the several. Like I don't know if we mentioned this or not, but this book is broken down into like disputes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would be like the first one
Yep.
of the many disputes.
The second dispute is that these people literally will not stay married at all. This comes out of some of the reforms from Nehemiah,
Infidels.
because Ezra and Nehemiah were teaching the people, like, you cannot be married to foreign women. That is prohibited by the law because of worship, not because of nationality. And it seems like people are kind of taking this period of reform like out of hand.
Well, I don't remember if you just said it or not, but this is against like unjust divorce. That's what you said, but
100%.
also that intermarrying with unbelievers.
Exactly.
Like that kind of what we talked about the other day.
Exactly. And so they get really loose with how they're handling divorce, which I think is interesting because there's a lot of questions about divorce to Jesus in the New Testament. Mm-hmm. And if you consider that this is the book that was the most recent book, it was only about 400 years old at Jesus' time, it makes sense that they'd be concerned about divorce because that is a theme in this book. And so Malachi is basically saying, like, hey, God wants you to take your marriage seriously. Your marriage is a covenant. You keep that covenant. You don't just get divorced willy-nilly and make everybody adulterers.
Mm-hmm. Actually, just kidding about the first dispute earlier. That was first and second. This is third.
Yeah.
Yikes.
So you had mentioned earlier that chapter 3 really stood out to you.
Yeah, I really like it because there's this language that's being used about a messenger preparing the way for me. So chapter 3 opens up about this messenger of the Lord. And it says, behold, I send my messenger. He will prepare the way before me. And that is so cool to me because it's like, who do we know that comes? Like God in human form, Jesus. That's so cool. I love that. It's almost as if we're hearing like Jesus speaking these words when they refer to the Lord. Is that like a thing? That to me is just like, that's so cool.
Well, I mean, God is 3 in 1.
Yes, but like that reference is referring to Jesus coming. So that is like, it like gives me goosebumps. It's so cool. But then we keep going down and it in verse 2, it just like really emphasizes the importance of it. Verse 2 says, but who can endure the day of his coming, and who can stand when he appears? For he is like a refiner's fire and like fuller's soap. So it's basically saying like, you guys have messed up. Like the sacrifices aren't pleasing to me, but there is someone who is coming. And when he comes, he will refine you like a refiner's fire, which is even more so reiterated in verse 5 of chapter 3, because he says, as he's going to be refining the people of their sin, it says, verse 5, then I will draw near to you. So we have like this image of the Lord coming to draw near to us because he loves us. But these words are like the real kicker. It says, I will draw near to you for judgment. Like, what? We're like in a world today where it's like, oh, the Lord's going to draw near to you and he's going to love you and he's going to see you through your sin. Well, yes, but I think we so easily and so like, I don't know, we just are so quick to dismiss the fact that there is judgment. Like he is the refiner, meaning that you have to be rid of all impurities to live in right relationship with God. It can't just be, come to me, I'm going to love you regardless of all the things that you were up to and are still up to. It's, I'm going to love you and I'm going to purify you of the things that you're going to let go of right here, right now, to turn to live a different way. And that's crazy to me.
Chapter 3 also contains the passages that are the favorite passages of like any prosperity preacher or any like, I don't know, sketchy people that want you to give them tons of money.
Pause. The thing that I was just talking about, that would be considered the fourth dispute. I think that's worth mentioning.
Okay.
Because it's basically saying, is God just or unjust? And he is just for judging.
Yeah.
And then it moves into, pretty quickly, this fifth dispute about taking away from the Lord.
Okay,
taking
so
away from God.
this is an issue I think that requires a lot of wisdom and discernment. I want to be clear on a couple of things. Like, you should be giving to God. You should be giving to God your first, your best, and oftentimes over and above 10% of what you have. And you can be comfortable hearing that from me because I'm not telling you to give that money to me. Like, I don't have like ulterior motives here. So God does require us to give. Everything that we have comes from God, and it's kind of silly to hoard it for ourselves and not give it back. And so in Malachi 3, the language that's used is actually like theft. Like, you are robbing from God because you are keeping the things that he has given you, and you are not returning the percentage that he requires. And God does promise that if you were to do this, if you were to put me to the test, so God's actually like, hey, I'll prove it. Like, I'll show you. He's saying, if you give to me what I require, I will bless you abundantly because of what I will do and how I will care for you. And this is in a time of Persian taxation. Mm-hmm. So it's not even fair to say that they weren't experiencing any kind of like exterior
They were feeling
pressures.
it.
They were feeling it. And God was saying, put me to the test. So this is cool. This is a blessing from God. And it is a promise from God, I think, that when you give what he requires, he will bless you and care for you. Does that look like Lamborghinis and jets and like,
lots and lots
lottery
and lots
tickets?
of money?
I don't think so. It's not to say that there's not like really successful, really well-off, financially successful believers. There are. So I laid the groundwork there. Like, these things are true. I think the thing that requires a lot of wisdom and discernment is that also people who are fakes and want to take your money and take advantage of your faith so that they can be rich love this verse and this chapter and these passages, and they will promise you a bunch of nonsensical things to take advantage of you.
Our study Bible says God promises to meet all of their needs, but not necessarily all of their wishes. This is not a promise of wealth in return for obedience.
Exactly.
And I think that's where we get hung up. Like, that's the same verse that we'll see in the New Testament. Like, God provides everything that those cute little birds outside need. Like, they have the food they need to survive because God provides it. And like, they're just a dumb bird. Like, when we give to the Lord, he's going to provide for us. If that looks like, a pound of beef in the refrigerator, or like $20 that we're going to use for something that we weren't anticipating, God's going to provide for us. But it may not always look or feel like what we want it to.
So I think the thing to be really careful about here is, one, God does tell us to give. So you can't look at these passages and be like, nope, I'm not giving. That's wrong. Two, people love to take advantage of this. So I think it's really, really important to look at fruit and see like, okay, like, what is this ministry producing? Like, what is coming out of these people who are asking for my money? What are they planning on using my money to do? There are many, many ministries that are using these passages to enrich themselves, and it is wrong. They are evil shepherds. And there are many, many ministries that do not have like really fancy looking people with really persuasive looking language that are doing really good work, and they need help. Mm-hmm. And it would be really good for you to like give to them and to help them. And so there's a real balance here. There's a real wisdom here, because I do not want to encourage you to be disobedient to God, but I also don't want to encourage you to be obedient to somebody who is definitely trying to sell you snake oil and take advantage of you.
Silly little plug, and I think I can do it just because we're definitely going to go over in a little bit in this episode because Malachi is just so packed. But recently, we've been teaching our kids in homeschool. We've been learning about George Mueller, and it's been so interesting, even the impact that has had on our children, because George Mueller was a man who always went to God with his needs. Never did he go out and like say, hey, I need your money, or hey, I need help. He ran like an orphanage for young kids, and obviously had many, 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 many needs in order to run said orphanage. But there are stories after stories that we learn about where he would just consistently go to the Lord and ask for his provisions and his deliverance from crazy situations. And there were things that happened, like they were provided for. There was actually a man who wanted to give him money in a check, and he was just like, you know what? I'm not going to take this because I know that God's going to provide things that we need. And I'm so thankful. I don't want to become reliant on what you're giving. So like, it's just that idea that like we are giving to the Lord and he will provide for us. So it's just like, it's a really cool thing. Our kids love it. I think
They do. Yeah.
it's an encouragement to us and
really discerning themselves.
makes us feel a little.
So it's just super important to be obedient to God. He does want you to give your first and best, and also be extremely wise with where you're giving it. I think even I would go so far as to say, like, you should probably have some level of relationship with who you're giving things to, so that you know, like, what it's going towards. And that's extra credit. That's not the word of the Lord. That's just like, man, like, I want to be obedient. I want to give the money that I'm supposed to give. But I also want to know that it's actually being used to build God's kingdom and not somebody's new house or new wing or new car. You might have a problem with that. You can let me know in the comments. You can email us. That's fine. I'm open to discussion on it. But I just really care about handling this passage well and carefully. So then we move into chapter 4. And chapter 4 talks about the great coming day of the Lord. And chapter 4 also says in verse 5, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes." And this is a great segue into the New Testament, because John the Baptist is out there calling people to repentance. And they're saying, hey, are you the promised one? And he says, no, I'm the prophet Elijah who's saying to come to prepare the way. And why was he saying those things? Because this is the book that people were reading and trying to figure out what was going on, because the Lord was silent for 400 years. So the book of Malachi is packed. I think you can have a little bit of your part buffet today. Just pick through anything we talked about. There's so much in here, and apply it to your life. Tomorrow, we'll be opening up the book of Luke as well as the book of John. So we'll see you then. And we're excited to have completed the Old Testament with you. I hope you have grown a lot in your faith and understanding of God. I know we certainly have, and we're enjoying this journey with you. We'll be back in tomorrow. We'll see you then.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.